Chapter 1. The Journey Begins. Your Invitation to Think Differently. You know that feeling when you're scrolling through life and suddenly something stops you dead in your tracks? Maybe it's watching someone effortlessly handle a crisis while you're still figuring out what question to ask. Or perhaps it's that colleague who always seems 3 steps ahead, making decisions that just work. What's their secret? Here's the truth that nobody tells you. It's not magic, and they weren't born with some special gene. What separates those who navigate life's chaos with grace from those who constantly feel overwhelmed is something beautifully simple, yet profoundly powerful: the art of thinking critically. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're walking through a bustling marketplace in Marrakech. The air is thick with the scent of spices, voices calling out in a dozen languages, colors exploding from every stall. It's overwhelming, right? Now imagine having a filter that helps you process all this sensory overload, distinguishing what matters from what's just noise. That's what critical thinking does for your mind in the marketplace of modern life. But here's where most people get it wrong. When you hear critical thinking, you might picture some stern academic type, arms crossed, shooting down everyone's ideas. That's not it at all. Critical thinking isn't about being negative or contrary. It's not about winning arguments or making people feel small. Think of it more like being a skilled gardener in the garden of your own mind, carefully tending to thoughts, pulling out the weeds of assumption, and nurturing the seeds of genuine understanding. The real definition: it's a conscious, deliberate way of processing information that involves breaking down what you hear, see, and experience into manageable pieces, examining each piece carefully, and then putting it all back together to form judgments that actually make sense. It's about pausing before you react, stepping outside your automatic responses, and looking at situations from angles you haven't considered yet. Here's something that might surprise you. One of the biggest myths about critical thinking is that you're either born with it or you're not. Oh, Sarah's just naturally analytical, people say, as if analytical thinking is like having blue eyes, something you either have or don't. This is completely, utterly, beautifully wrong. Critical thinking is more like learning to play guitar. At first, your fingers fumble, the chords sound terrible, and you wonder if you'll ever get it. But with practice, consistent, intentional practice, those same fingers start moving smoothly across the strings. The music flows. Your brain works the same way. Every time you pause to question an assumption, every time you consider an alternative perspective, you're building new neural pathways. You're literally rewiring your brain to think more effectively. And the payoff? It's enormous. In your personal life, critical thinking transforms how you connect with people. Instead of jumping to conclusions about why your partner forgot to call, you pause and consider multiple possibilities. Maybe they're stressed about work. Maybe they're planning a surprise. Maybe their phone died. This pause, this moment of considering alternatives, can save you from unnecessary arguments and deepen your empathy. You start seeing people not as problems to solve, but as complex beings navigating their own challenges. In your relationships, it's like having a superpower. You become someone who really listens, not just waits for their turn to talk. You understand that when your friend cancels plans for the 3rd time, it might not be about you. It could be anxiety, overwhelm, or something they're struggling to articulate. This understanding builds bridges where assumptions would build walls. Professionally, the impact is even more dramatic. In today's world, where information changes faster than seasons and industries transform overnight. The ability to think critically is what separates those who merely survive from those who thrive. Employers aren't just looking for people who can follow a manual anymore. They're hungry for minds that can see patterns, connect dots that seem unrelated, and solve problems that don't have clear solutions yet. Think about it this way. If you're a sailor in the Caribbean, knowing how to follow a map when the weather is calm is useful. But what happens when a storm hits? When the maps get wet and tear, when visibility drops to nothing, when every wave threatens to capsize you? That's when you need critical thinking, the ability to read the stars, feel the wind, understand the current, and navigate by integrating multiple sources of information in real time. As you begin this journey with me, I want you to understand something fundamental. This isn't just about changing how you think. It's about transforming your entire relationship with reality. You're going to learn to question things you've always accepted without examination. You're going to challenge your own deeply held beliefs, and that's going to feel uncomfortable sometimes. You might even feel frustrated or resistant. Good. That discomfort is growth trying to happen. Throughout this guide, we're going to explore the landscape of critical thinking together. We'll dive deep into understanding how your mind actually works, all those hidden biases and automatic patterns that shape your perceptions without you even realizing it. We'll examine the foundations of logical reasoning, learning to spot when arguments are solid and when they're built on sand. We'll discover techniques for solving problems that seem impossible at first glance. But here's the most important part, and why I wanted to start here with self-awareness. Before you can think critically about the world, you need to think critically about yourself. You need to understand your own mental landscape, the hills and valleys of your thought patterns, the rivers of emotion that run through your reasoning, the forests of beliefs that sometimes obscure your view. In the coming chapters, we'll explore all of this and more. We'll look at how to make better decisions when information is incomplete. We'll learn to build mental resilience so that setbacks become stepping stones instead of roadblocks. We'll discover how to communicate your ideas so clearly that others can't help but understand you. And we'll tackle the ethical dimensions of thinking, because critical thinking without ethics is just clever manipulation. But right now, at the start of this adventure, I want to ask you something. Are you ready? Are you ready to question beliefs you've held since childhood? Are you ready to discover that some of your most confident opinions might be built on shaky foundations? Are you ready to feel uncertain before you feel clear? Because the path ahead isn't always comfortable. There will be moments when you realize you've been wrong about something important. Moments when your certainty crumbles and you have to rebuild your understanding from scratch. But there will also be moments of profound clarity. Those beautiful instances when suddenly everything clicks into place, when you see connections you never noticed before, when problems that seemed impossible suddenly reveal their solutions. The rewards for this journey are immeasurable. You'll find yourself making decisions with greater confidence. You'll navigate conflicts with more grace. You'll spot opportunities others miss. You'll build stronger relationships because you truly understand yourself and others better. You'll contribute more meaningfully to your work, your community, your family, and perhaps most importantly, you'll feel more at home in your own mind. Instead of being tossed around by every strong opinion or emotional current, you'll stand firm in your own carefully considered understanding. You won't be rigid. Critical thinking actually makes you more flexible, more able to adapt when new information arrives. But you'll be grounded in a process you trust. So here's what comes next. In the following chapter, we're going to turn our attention inward. We're going to explore the fascinating, sometimes messy, always complex world of your own thought patterns. This is crucial groundwork. You can't navigate the external world effectively until you understand the internal landscape through which you view it. Think of it like this. If you're wearing tinted glasses but don't realize it, you'll think the whole world is that color. Only by recognizing and understanding the lenses through which you see can you begin to see clearly. Your thought patterns, your biases, your automatic assumptions, these are your lenses, and we're about to examine them closely. Before we move on, I want you to do something for me. Take a moment, just 60 seconds, and think about a recent decision you made. Anything from choosing what to eat for breakfast to deciding whether to take a new job. Now ask yourself, what assumptions did I make? What information did I consider? What did I ignore? Were there alternatives I didn't even think about? If you're drawing a blank, that's perfectly normal. Most of our thinking happens on autopilot, below the level of conscious awareness. But that's exactly what we're going to change. You're about to become aware of processes that have been running in the background your entire life. And one more thing before we continue. This journey works best when you engage actively. Don't just read these words passively. Question them. Test them against your own experience. Try the exercises. Reflect on the examples. Make this personal. The more you put into this process, the more you'll get out of it. The transformation that awaits you is real. I've seen it happen in countless people. Students who went from struggling to make decisions, to confidently navigating complex choices. Professionals who went from following others' lead to pioneering new solutions. Individuals who went from feeling overwhelmed by life to actively shaping their destiny. You can be one of them. Actually, you already are. By choosing to engage with this material, by being open to examining your own thinking, you've already taken the first step. The fact that you're here reading these words means you're ready for growth. You might not feel ready. Growth rarely feels comfortable at first, but you're here, and that's what matters. So take a breath. Let your mind settle. In the next chapter, we're going inside, exploring the vast, unexplored territory of your own mental landscape. We're going to discover patterns you never knew existed, biases hiding in plain sight, and the beautiful complexity of how you actually think. The journey to mastering critical thinking begins not with looking outward at the world, but with looking inward at yourself. And that journey starts now. Are you ready to meet your own mind? Chapter 2. The Mirror Within. Discovering Your Mental Landscape. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're standing at the entrance of a vast labyrinth. The walls stretch upward into mist, pathways branch in every direction, and somewhere deep within lies a treasure. Clearer thinking, better decisions, authentic understanding. This labyrinth is your mind, and most people spend their entire lives walking its corridors without ever stopping to study the map. Here's something wild. You've been thinking your entire life, but how much have you actually thought about your thinking? It's like being a fish that never notices the water. Your thoughts flow continuously, shaping every decision, coloring every perception, yet they remain largely invisible to you. This is where self-awareness comes in, not the pop psychology version where you know your favorite color, or whether you're an introvert, but deep, structural self-awareness, the kind where you can observe your own mental processes as they happen, like watching a river flow while simultaneously being the river. Let me tell you about Marcus, a project manager I met at a workshop in Portland. Brilliant guy, Harvard MBA, could strategize circles around anyone in the room, but he kept making the same mistakes in his personal relationships. Every time a conflict arose with his wife or kids, he'd shut down emotionally. When I asked him why, he genuinely had no idea. "I just do," he said, frustrated. "We started working with mindfulness practices, not the fluffy kind, but serious observation of his own mental patterns. And one day, about 3 weeks in, he called me excited. I saw it happen," he said. "A disagreement started, and I watched my mind immediately jump to, 'They're attacking me.' Like I could see the thought forming before it took over, and for the first time, I had a choice about whether to believe it." That's the power of self-awareness. It creates space between stimulus and response, between what happens and how you react. In that space lives your freedom. So how do you develop this? One of the most powerful techniques is mindfulness practice, and I need you to forget everything you think you know about meditation. This isn't about sitting cross-legged humming mantras, though if that works for you, great. This is about training your mind to watch itself think. Here's a simple practice you can start today. Set a timer for 5 minutes, sit comfortably, close your eyes, and just watch your thoughts. Don't try to control them. Don't judge them. Don't follow them down rabbit holes. Just observe. There's a thought about dinner. There's a worry about tomorrow's meeting. There's a memory from childhood. At first, this will feel impossible. Your mind will be like a puppy, constantly running off, chasing squirrels, digging holes. That's normal. The practice isn't about having no thoughts. It's about noticing when you've gotten lost in thought and gently bringing your attention back to observation. Every time you notice you've wandered and bring yourself back, you're building the muscle of self-awareness. Do this daily for a month, and I guarantee you'll start noticing thought patterns you never knew you had. Maybe you catastrophize, always jumping to worst-case scenarios. Maybe you personalize, assuming everything is about you. Maybe you have a mental filter that only lets in information confirming what you already believe. Another powerful tool is reflective journaling, but not the Dear Diary kind you might remember from school. This is archaeological journaling, digging into your own mental processes to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. Here's how it works. At the end of each day, take 10 minutes to write about a decision you made or a reaction you had. But don't just describe what happened. Dig deeper. What were you feeling in that moment? What assumptions were you making? What past experiences might have influenced your reaction? What information did you consider? What did you ignore? Let me give you an example from my own journal. Last Tuesday, I had a strong negative reaction to a colleague's suggestion in a meeting. I initially journaled. Sarah suggested we change the project timeline, and I thought it was a terrible idea. But then I dug deeper. Why did I think it was terrible? What assumptions was I making about the timeline, about Sarah's motivations, about what success looks like? As I wrote, I realized I was attached to the timeline because I'd created it. Sarah's suggestion felt like criticism of my work. But was it? Or was she just trying to solve a problem? When I examined my thought process, I saw my ego had hijacked my reasoning. The next day, I went back to Sarah and asked her to explain her thinking. Turns out, she had information I didn't have about a client's schedule. Her suggestion wasn't criticism, it was problem solving. That's what reflective journaling does. It turns the invisible visible. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and uncomfortable. As you start observing your thought patterns, you're going to encounter cognitive biases. These are systematic errors in thinking that everyone has. They're not flaws in your character. They're features of how human brains evolved to process information quickly in a dangerous world. The problem is, we're not in that dangerous ancestral environment anymore. We're in a complex modern world where those quick mental shortcuts often lead us astray. Take confirmation bias, probably the most pervasive bias humans have. This is your mind's tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms what you already believe while ignoring or dismissing information that contradicts it. It's like wearing filters that only let through certain colors of light. Think about political beliefs. If you lean left, notice how you react to news that confirms your views versus news that challenges them. If you lean right, same thing. We all do this. We're not trying to be close-minded. Our brains are literally wired to defend existing beliefs because changing beliefs feels threatening to our sense of identity and safety. Another sneaky one is the availability heuristic. This is when you overestimate the likelihood of events that are easy to remember or imagine. After watching news coverage of a plane crash, people become terrified of flying, even though, statistically, driving to the airport is far more dangerous. The vivid, emotional memory of the crash coverage makes that risk feel more real than the abstract statistics about car accidents. Or consider the anchoring effect. Your first piece of information on a topic acts like a mental anchor, and all subsequent information is evaluated relative to it. This is why negotiation experts tell you to make the first offer. It sets the anchor. If you're selling a house and the buyer's first offer is absurdly low, that number becomes the reference point, making your counteroffer seem high, even if it's perfectly reasonable. Here's what makes these biases so insidious. You can't eliminate them. They're hardwired into human cognition. But you can become aware of them and develop strategies to counteract them. The first step is simply naming them when you spot them in action. Like Marcus learning to notice his defensive reaction, you can learn to catch yourself in the act of biased thinking. Oh, there I go again, cherry-picking evidence that supports my position. That's confirmation bias. The simple act of naming it creates distance from it. One exercise I love is called devil's advocate journaling. Pick a belief you hold strongly about politics, health, relationships, whatever. Now spend 15 minutes writing the strongest possible argument against that belief. Not a straw man version, but the most compelling counter-argument you can imagine. Channel the smartest person who disagrees with you and let them make their case through your pen. This is brutally difficult at first. Your mind will resist. It feels uncomfortable, almost dangerous, to argue against your own beliefs. But this discomfort is the feeling of growth. By forcing yourself to articulate opposing views, you're training your brain to see beyond its own biases. Another powerful technique is seeking out diverse perspectives. And I don't just mean reading articles from different political viewpoints, though that's valuable. I mean genuinely engaging with people whose life experiences are radically different from yours. If you've always lived in cities, spend real time with rural folks. If you're religious, have deep conversations with atheists. If you're an atheist, talk theology with believers. If you're wealthy, volunteer where you interact with people in poverty. If you're in poverty, find ways to understand how the wealthy think. Not to change anyone's mind, but to understand how different starting points lead to different conclusions. Here's a question that's changed my life. What might I be missing? I ask this constantly now, in meetings, during conflicts, when making decisions. It's a simple question, but it opens a door in your mind. It invites you to consider that your current view, however clear and compelling it seems, might be incomplete. Let me share something vulnerable. A few years ago, I was absolutely certain I understood the best way to raise children. I didn't have kids, but I'd read the research, talked to experts, observed parents. I had it all figured out. Then I became a father. Within 3 months, virtually every confident opinion I'd held crumbled. The reality was infinitely more complex, more situational, more exhausting, and beautiful than any book could capture. That experience humbled me in the best way. It taught me that confidence in your conclusions should be proportional to your experience and evidence. And it taught me that the most dangerous thoughts are the ones you're most certain about, because certainty closes the door to learning. As you develop self-awareness and start recognizing your biases, you'll probably feel worse before you feel better. It's like cleaning out a closet. At first, the mess spreads everywhere, and you wonder why you started. You'll become aware of how often you jump to conclusions, how frequently your emotions hijack your reasoning, how many of your logical positions are actually just rationalizations of what you want to believe. This is a necessary stage. You're developing what psychologists call metacognition, thinking about thinking. You're climbing up to an observation deck from which you can see your own mental landscape clearly. And from that vantage point, real change becomes possible. In our next chapter, we're going to take these foundations of self-awareness and build on them. We'll explore the fundamental principles of logical reasoning and evidence-based thinking. You'll learn to construct solid arguments and spot flawed ones. But everything we're about to learn rests on this foundation: knowing yourself, understanding your biases, and developing the mental flexibility to see beyond your automatic patterns. Before we move on, I want to give you homework. For the next week, practice this simple exercise. Every time you have a strong emotional reaction to something, anger, fear, excitement, disgust, pause and ask yourself, what assumption am I making right now? Write down the answer. Just that. No judgment. No trying to change it. Just notice and record. You're about to discover things about how you think that will surprise you. Some will be uncomfortable. Some will be enlightening. All of them will be valuable. The mirror is in front of you. Are you ready to look deeply? Chapter 3. Building your mental toolkit, the foundations of clear thinking. Imagine you're an architect, but instead of designing buildings, you're designing arguments. Instead of working with steel and concrete, you're working with logic and evidence. Just as a physical structure needs a solid foundation to stand, an idea needs a solid foundation of reasoning to hold up under scrutiny. Welcome to the workshop where we build that foundation. Let's start with something fundamental: logical reasoning. At its core, logic is about connections, how one idea leads to another, how premises support conclusions, how evidence relates to claims. It's the skeleton that gives structure to our thinking. Think about it like this. If I tell you all birds can fly and penguins are birds, therefore penguins can fly, something feels wrong, right? But why? the logic is valid. If the premises were true, the conclusion would have to be true. The problem is that one of the premises is false. Not all birds can fly. This is a crucial distinction. Valid reasoning versus sound reasoning. Valid means the logic works. Sound means the logic works and the premises are true. Let's break down logical reasoning into its components. At the most basic level, you have deductive reasoning, moving from general principles to specific conclusions. Here's a clean example. All mammals have hearts. Luna is a cat. Cats are mammals. Therefore, Luna has a heart. If the premises are true, and they are, the conclusion must be true. It's airtight. Then there's inductive reasoning, which moves in the opposite direction, from specific observations to general principles. I've observed hundreds of swans, and they were all white. Therefore, all swans are probably white. Notice the word probably. Inductive reasoning doesn't give you certainty, it gives you probability. It's how science works, gathering evidence and forming theories that best explain the patterns we observe. The problem is, inductive reasoning can lead you astray if you're not careful. For centuries, Europeans believed all swans were white based on extensive observation. Then they discovered Australia and encountered black swans. One contradictory example shattered what seemed like an ironclad conclusion. This is why critical thinkers always hold their inductive conclusions tentatively, ready to revise them when new evidence appears. It's not wishy-washy, it's intellectually honest. Now let's talk about logical fallacies, errors in reasoning that look convincing but actually undermine arguments. These are everywhere once you start noticing them, in political speeches, advertisements, social media debates, even in your own thinking. One common fallacy is the ad hominem attack. Instead of addressing someone's argument, you attack their character. Of course he thinks we should raise taxes. He's a liberal. Okay, but that doesn't tell us whether raising taxes is actually a good idea. The argument needs to stand or fall on its own merits, not on who's making it. Another is the false dichotomy, where someone presents only two options when actually more exist. Either you're with us or against us. Really? What about people who partially agree, or who need more information, or who think the whole framing of the question is wrong? Life is rarely binary, but false dichotomies try to force it into neat either-or boxes. The slippery slope fallacy assumes that one action will inevitably lead to a chain of catastrophic consequences without evidence for that chain. If we allow people to work from home on Fridays, soon everyone will want to work from home all the time. Productivity will plummet and the company will collapse. Maybe, or maybe not. You need evidence for each step in that chain, not just anxiety about where it might lead. Here's one that trips up even smart people. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is Latin for after this, therefore because of this. Just because B happened after A doesn't mean A caused B. I wore my lucky socks and we won the game, therefore my socks caused the win. Correlation doesn't equal causation, probably the most important principle in all of statistics and critical thinking. Let me tell you about my friend Jennifer, a marketing executive in Chicago. She was convinced that their new advertising campaign was working because sales went up the week after it launched. She was ready to dump another $100,000 into expanding it. But when we looked closer, we discovered that a competitor had just gone out of business that same week. The sales increase was probably due to capturing their customers, not the ad campaign's brilliance. By understanding the post hoc fallacy, Jennifer saved her company from wasting money on ineffective advertising. Now, let's shift gears to evidence-based thinking. This is the commitment to base your conclusions on verifiable facts and reliable data rather than gut feelings, personal preferences, or what you want to be true. Notice I said commitment. Evidence-based thinking isn't natural. Our brains evolved to make quick decisions based on incomplete information because waiting for perfect data would get you eaten by a tiger. But in the modern world, that evolved tendency often leads us astray. Evidence-based thinking requires asking, what do I actually know? How do I know it? How reliable is my source? What's the quality of this evidence? Am I giving too much weight to my personal experience and ignoring broader data? Let's say you're considering whether to invest in cryptocurrency. Your cousin made a fortune in Bitcoin and keeps telling you it's a guaranteed win. That's anecdotal evidence, one person's experience. What does the broader data say? What do financial experts say? What are the risks? What percentage of people actually make money versus lose money? One person's success story, while compelling, isn't a solid foundation for decision-making. This is where you need to evaluate sources. Not all information is created equal. A peer-reviewed study published in a reputable scientific journal carries more weight than a blog post by someone with no expertise. A first-hand account from someone who experienced an event carries more weight than rumors passed through multiple people. But here's the nuance. Expert opinion also needs to be weighed carefully. Experts can have biases, conflicts of interest, or blind spots. That's why you want multiple expert sources, preferably ones who don't have skin in the game. If a pharmaceutical company funds a study showing their drug is amazing, that's less reliable than an independent study showing the same thing. Developing evidence-based thinking requires cultivating three key attitudes: curiosity, open-mindedness, and intellectual humility. Curiosity drives you to ask questions and seek out information beyond your current bubble. It's the opposite of satisfied certainty. Curious people don't just accept the first explanation they encounter. They wonder about alternatives, about deeper causes, about what they might be missing. Open-mindedness is the willingness to seriously consider ideas that challenge your existing beliefs. This doesn't mean being so open-minded that your brain falls out, accepting every crazy idea that comes along. It means giving fair consideration to views you initially disagree with, looking for the strongest version of those arguments rather than dismissing them out of hand. Intellectual humility is recognizing that your knowledge is always incomplete, that you can learn from others, even those you disagree with, and that being wrong is an opportunity to get closer to truth rather than a personal failing. It's the antidote to arrogance. Here's a practice that embodies all three. Actively seek out information that contradicts your views. If you believe something strongly, go find the smartest critics of that position and really engage with their arguments. Don't look for weak versions you can easily dismiss. Find the strongest counter-arguments and wrestle with them. This is hard. Your brain will resist. Every cell in your body will want to dismiss opposing views and retreat to the comfort of your existing beliefs. But growth happens in that discomfort. Let me share a personal example. I used to believe that more choices always led to better outcomes, more freedom, more autonomy, more satisfaction. Then I encountered research by psychologist Barry Schwartz on the paradox of choice, showing that Too many options can actually lead to anxiety, paralysis, and dissatisfaction. My initial reaction was defensive, but I sat with that discomfort and really engaged with the evidence, and I realized he was right. Too many choices can overwhelm our decision-making capacity. That shift in understanding has influenced everything from how I design decision-making processes to how I choose restaurants. And it only happened because I was willing to seriously consider evidence that contradicted my beliefs. As we close this chapter, I want you to understand that logical reasoning and evidence-based thinking aren't just abstract academic skills. They are practical tools that will change how you navigate everyday life. When someone tries to sell you something, you'll automatically start analyzing their arguments, spotting fallacies, asking about evidence. When you face a difficult decision, you'll know how to structure your thinking, evaluate options systematically, and base your choice on solid reasoning rather than impulse. When you encounter news that confirms your worldview, you'll pause and ask what evidence supports it, what alternative explanations might exist. This is the beginning of building a critical thinking mindset, a way of approaching the world that combines healthy skepticism with genuine openness, rigorous analysis with intellectual humility. In our next chapter, we're going to dive into one of the biggest obstacles to clear thinking, our own cognitive biases. We've touched on them, but now we're going deep. You're going to learn about the hidden forces that shape your perceptions and judgments without your awareness. And more importantly, you're going to learn strategies to counteract them. But first, some homework. For the next 3 days, I want you to play detective with arguments you encounter in news articles, conversations, social media posts. Identify the claims being made, the evidence provided, and the logical structure connecting them. Then ask, are there any fallacies here? Is the evidence solid? What assumptions are being made? Write down what you find. You're training your mind to automatically analyze arguments, to see their structure as clearly as an architect sees the load-bearing beams in a building. The toolkit is taking shape. Keep building. Chapter 4. The Invisible Forces. Unmasking Your Cognitive Biases. Picture this. You're driving down a highway at night, confident in your direction, when suddenly you realize your GPS has been wrong for the last 30 miles. You've been traveling with absolute certainty, but in completely the wrong direction. That's what cognitive biases do to your thinking. They send you confidently in the wrong direction without you even knowing it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your brain is lying to you, not maliciously, not intentionally, but constantly. And the scariest part? You can't see it happening. Cognitive biases are systematic patterns of deviation from rationality and judgment. They're the result of your brain trying to process an overwhelming amount of information using mental shortcuts. In our ancestral environment, these shortcuts saved lives. Seeing a shadow move and assuming it's a predator kept you alive more often than waiting to verify it was just wind in the bushes. But in the modern world, these same shortcuts lead us to make poor decisions, form inaccurate beliefs, and maintain false certainties. The challenge isn't that we have biases. Everyone does, even experts who study biases for a living. The challenge is that they operate below conscious awareness, invisible, unless you specifically look for them. Let me introduce you to some of the most powerful and pervasive biases that are likely influencing your thinking right now, in this very moment, as you read these words. First, there's confirmation bias. the heavyweight champion of cognitive biases. This is your mind's tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms your pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. It's like your brain has a bouncer at the door of your consciousness, letting in ideas that agree with you and turning away those that don't. Let me tell you about Rachel, a friend who runs a tech startup in Austin. She believed remote work was inherently less productive than office work. Every time an employee working from home missed a deadline or seemed less engaged, she noticed it immediately and mentally filed it as proof that remote work doesn't work. But when office workers had the same issues, she barely registered it. Her brain was filtering reality to confirm what she already believed. Then one day, her business partner showed her the actual data. Their remote workers were hitting deadlines at the same rate as office workers, sometimes better. Rachel was stunned. She'd been so sure of what she was seeing, but she wasn't seeing reality. She was seeing reality filtered through confirmation bias. Here's how it works in your life. If you believe that people from a certain political party are unreasonable, you'll notice and remember every example of unreasonable behavior from that group while explaining away or not even registering reasonable behavior. If you believe a certain diet is best, you'll eagerly share studies supporting it while dismissing contradictory research as flawed. If you believe you're bad at math, you'll focus on every mistake as proof while downplaying your successes as luck. The antidote to confirmation bias is deliberately seeking out disconfirming evidence. Make it a practice. Whenever you believe something strongly, go hunting for the best arguments against it. Subscribe to a publication that challenges your worldview. Follow thoughtful people who disagree with you. Force yourself to articulate why you might be wrong. This feels awful at first. Your brain will resist like a toddler resisting vegetables. But it's exactly that resistance that tells you you're doing something valuable. Next up, the availability heuristic. This is when you judge the probability or frequency of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. The more vivid, recent, or emotionally charged the memory, the more likely you are to overestimate its occurrence. After the news covers a series of shark attacks one summer, beach attendance drops dramatically. People become terrified of sharks, even though statistically, you're more likely to die from a falling coconut than a shark attack. The vivid media coverage makes shark attacks feel more common and threatening than they actually are. Or consider this. Ask someone whether there are more words in English that start with the letter K or more words that have K as their third letter. Most people say words that start with K because those are easier to recall. Actually, there are about 3 times as many words with K as the third letter, but they're harder to think of, so our brains assume they're less common. This bias affects major life decisions. People overestimate the danger of flying after hearing about a crash. They overestimate the likelihood of winning the lottery because winners' stories are publicized. They overestimate crime rates because news focuses on violent incidents while ignoring the vast majority of peaceful days. The counter strategy? Actively seek out base rates and statistical data instead of relying on what easily comes to mind. When you feel afraid of something, ask, what are the actual numbers here? What does the data say about frequency and risk? Then there's anchoring bias, one of the most exploited biases in negotiation and sales. Your first piece of information on a topic acts as a mental anchor, and all subsequent information is unconsciously adjusted relative to that anchor. Real estate agents know this intimately. They show you an overpriced house first, the anchor, and suddenly the normally priced house they show you next seems like a bargain. Retailers put an absurdly high original price on the tag so the sale price looks amazing, even if the sale price is what they always intended to charge. But anchoring affects more than just purchases. In salary negotiations, whoever names a number first sets the anchor. In legal cases, the initial damages requested influence. Final awards. In performance reviews, early impressions anchor the entire evaluation. I watched this play out with my brother Tom when he was buying a car in Seattle. The dealer initially quoted $35,000. Tom countered with $28,000. They eventually settled on $31,500, and Tom felt like he'd won a great negotiation. Later, we discovered the car's actual market value was around $29,000. The dealer's high initial anchor had shifted Tom's entire sense of what was reasonable. The defense against anchoring? Always do independent research before entering negotiations or making decisions. Know the market value, the baseline, the actual data, before anyone can plant an anchor in your mind. And when someone throws out an initial number, consciously acknowledge it as an anchor and set it aside while you gather objective information. Let's talk about the sunk cost fallacy, continuing to invest in something because you've already invested resources, time, money, effort, even when it's clear that continuing isn't in your best interest. This bias is why people stay in bad relationships, keep pouring money into failing businesses, or force themselves to finish terrible books. The logic goes, I've already spent 2 years in this career/relationship/project. I can't quit now. That would mean wasting those 2 years. But here's the rational truth. Those 2 years are gone, regardless of what you do now. The only question that matters is, going forward from this moment, what's the best use of your time and resources? I fell victim to this myself when I spent 3 months developing a workshop program that clearly wasn't working. Every week, the response was lukewarm at best, but I kept pushing because I'd already invested so much time. Finally, a mentor asked me a simple question. If you were starting fresh today, knowing what you know now, would you choose to develop this program? The answer was an immediate no. I scrapped it the next day and started working on something else, something that actually gained traction. The sunk cost fallacy keeps people trapped in losing situations. The antidote is asking, if I were making this decision fresh, with no prior investment, what would I choose? Treat what you've already invested as irrelevant to future decisions. Another powerful bias, the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is the tendency for people with low ability or knowledge in a domain to overestimate their competence, while experts often underestimate theirs. Novices don't know what they don't know, so they're confident. Experts know how much there is to know, so they're humble. This is why you'll hear someone who read 2 blog posts about economics pontificate with absolute certainty about complex fiscal policy, while actual economists speak in hedges and uncertainties. The person who took 1 photography class thinks they're ready to shoot weddings professionally, while the photographer with 30 years of experience still feels they have much to learn. I see this constantly in the personal development space. Someone has 1 breakthrough insight about their own psychology, and suddenly they're offering life coaching to others, completely unaware of the vast complexity of human behavior and therapeutic practice. The counter to Dunning-Kruger is cultivating genuine intellectual humility. The more you learn about a subject, the more you realize how much you don't know. Embrace uncertainty. Use phrases like, "I think," "it seems," "based on what I know," instead of absolute declarations. And be immediately suspicious of anyone who claims to have all the answers. Let me introduce you to a few more biases that are probably affecting your thinking right now. The fundamental attribution error. When others fail or behave badly, you attribute it to their character. They're lazy, incompetent, selfish. When you fail or behave badly, you attribute it to circumstances. I was tired, stressed, dealing with difficult situations. This asymmetry poisons relationships and prevents empathy. The halo effect. One positive trait influences your entire perception of someone. An attractive person seems more intelligent, trustworthy, competent. A successful entrepreneur's opinion on unrelated topics carries unwarranted weight. A funny person seems more credible. The recency bias. Recent events seem more significant than they are. The stock market's performance this week feels more important than its decade-long trend. Your partner's recent mistakes overshadow years of supportive behavior. Status quo bias, preferring things to stay the same, resisting change even when change would be beneficial. This is why companies keep using outdated systems, why people stay in mediocre situations, why we've always done it this way, is such a powerful and often harmful justification. Now, here's the really challenging part. You can't eliminate these biases. They're woven into the fabric of human cognition. Even psychologists who study biases for decades still fall prey to them. The goal isn't bias elimination, it's bias awareness and mitigation. So, what can you do? First, practice metacognition, thinking about your thinking. When making decisions, pause and ask, what biases might be affecting my judgment right now? Am I anchoring on some initial information? Am I only seeing confirming evidence? Am I falling victim to sunk costs? Second, seek out diverse perspectives. Your biases create blind spots, but other people have different blind spots. By engaging with diverse viewpoints, you can compensate for your individual biases. This is why diverse teams make better decisions than homogeneous ones. Different perspectives catch different errors. Third, make important decisions systematically. Use structured frameworks, checklists, and decision-making processes that force you to consider information you might naturally ignore. Pilots use checklists not because they're inexperienced, but because even experienced pilots have biases and make errors when relying on intuition alone. Fourth, create accountability structures. Share your reasoning with others and invite criticism. Assign someone to play devil's advocate and argue against your position. Make your thinking transparent so others can spot the biases you can't see. Fifth, practice intellectual humility. Hold your beliefs tentatively. Be genuinely open to being wrong. Celebrate discovering you were mistaken because it means you just got closer to truth. This attitude shift makes it emotionally easier to acknowledge biases when they're pointed out. Let me share a powerful technique I use: bias journaling. Each evening, I reflect on a decision or judgment I made that day and ask, what biases might have influenced this? I write down which biases I suspect were at play and how they might have affected my thinking. Over time, I've developed better awareness of my personal bias patterns. For example, I've discovered I have a strong negativity bias. I give much more weight to negative information than positive. If I get 10 pieces of positive feedback and 1 piece of criticism, I'll obsess over the criticism. Knowing this about myself, I can now consciously compensate by forcing myself to give appropriate weight to the positive feedback. Another exercise, pre-mortem analysis. Before making a major decision, imagine it's 6 months in the future, and the decision was a disaster. Now work backward. Why did it fail? What did you overlook? What assumptions were wrong? This technique helps you spot potential biases and blind spots before they cause problems. Here's something crucial to understand. Becoming aware of your biases can initially make you feel worse, not better. You start seeing all the ways your thinking is flawed. You second-guess yourself constantly. You feel paralyzed by awareness of all the potential errors. This is a temporary phase. Push through it. On the other side is something remarkable. The ability to think more clearly, decide more wisely, and see reality more accurately than ever before. You won't be perfect. Nobody is. But you'll be significantly better. Think of it like learning to drive. At first, you're unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. Then you become consciously incompetent. You're aware of all the things you're getting wrong, and it's overwhelming. Then, with practice, you become consciously competent. You can drive well, but it requires focus and effort. Finally, you reach unconscious competence. Driving becomes automatic. Bias awareness follows a similar path. Right now, you might be moving from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. It feels uncomfortable, but keep practicing, and bias checking will become a natural part of how you think. As we close this chapter, I want you to understand something fundamental. Your biases aren't your enemies. They're tools your brain developed to help you survive and navigate a complex world. The problem is that the world has changed faster than our brains have evolved. Those once helpful shortcuts now sometimes lead us astray. The goal isn't to fight your brain or feel ashamed of your biases. It's to work with your brain, understanding its quirks and compensating for its systematic errors. It's to add a layer of conscious, deliberate thinking on top of automatic processing. In the next chapter, we're going to take this understanding and apply it to one of the most important skills you can develop, effective problem solving. You'll learn systematic techniques for tackling complex challenges, from everyday annoyances to life-changing decisions. But first, your homework. For the next week, keep a bias log. Each day, identify one instance where a cognitive bias influenced your thinking or decision-making. Name the bias, describe how it affected you, and note what you could do differently. Don't judge yourself. Just observe and learn. The invisible forces are becoming visible, and once you can see them, you can begin to navigate around them. Are you ready to solve problems with your newly sharpened awareness? Chapter 5. The Problem Solver's Path. Systematic Approaches to Complex Challenges. Let me tell you about the worst problem I ever tried to solve. 3 years ago, my company was bleeding money, employee morale was at an all-time low, and I couldn't figure out why. I'd lie awake at night, my mind spinning through possible solutions, getting nowhere. I felt like I was trapped in a maze where every path led to a dead end. The breakthrough came when I realized my approach was the problem. I was treating this tangled mess like a simple puzzle with one solution, when actually it was a complex system with multiple interacting issues. I needed a systematic approach, not scattered attempts at quick fixes. That's what effective problem solving is, a systematic approach to untangling complexity. Most people approach problems reactively and emotionally. Something goes wrong. They panic. They grab at the first solution that seems plausible, and they're surprised when it doesn't work. Or worse, they create new problems while trying to fix the original one. Critical thinkers approach problems differently. They step back, they analyze, they break complex issues into manageable components. They consider multiple solutions, they evaluate systematically, and they implement thoughtfully. Let me walk you through a framework that transforms problem solving from an anxious scramble into a confident process. Step 1. Define the problem. Clearly, this sounds obvious, but most problem-solving failures happen right here. People try to solve the wrong problem or solve the right problem poorly because they haven't defined it clearly. When I was struggling with my company, I initially defined the problem as we're not making enough money. That's a symptom, not a problem. It's like saying, I feel terrible to your doctor. Okay, but what's actually wrong? So I dug deeper. Why weren't we making money? Because client retention was low. Why was retention low? Because we weren't delivering value. Why weren't we delivering value? Because our team was burned out and making mistakes. Why were they burned out? Because I'd hired the wrong people for the wrong roles and then piled too much work on them. See how the problem shifts as you dig? The real problem wasn't revenue. It was hiring and workload management. Once I defined it correctly, solutions became apparent. This technique is called root cause analysis, and one of the best tools for it is the 5 whys. You ask why repeatedly until you get past symptoms to the underlying cause. It was developed by Toyota's manufacturing process, and it's brilliantly simple. Here's the key. A well-defined problem is already halfway to solved. If you can articulate precisely what's wrong, why it's wrong, and what success would look like, solutions often become obvious. Step 2. Gather relevant information. Once you've defined the problem, resist the temptation to immediately jump to solutions. First, gather information. Understand the landscape. What factors are involved? What constraints exist? What's been tried before? What do experts say? What does the data show? What perspectives am I missing? When my friend Daniel was trying to figure out why his marriage was struggling, he initially thought the problem was that his wife didn't appreciate him. But when he actually gathered information, talking to her, talking to a counselor, reflecting on patterns, he discovered the issue was that he'd been emotionally unavailable for years, working 80-hour weeks. She'd been trying to tell him, but he hadn't been listening. The information you gather should include multiple perspectives. Talk to people directly involved. Consult experts. Look at data. Read case studies of similar problems. Your goal is to understand the problem from every angle before you try to solve it. But be careful of analysis paralysis, gathering so much information that you never actually make a decision. There's a balance between gathering sufficient information and acting in a timely manner. Perfect information is rarely available. At some point, you need to make the best decision you can with the information you have. Step 3. Generate possible solutions. Divergent thinking. Now comes the creative part, brainstorming potential solutions. This is divergent thinking, expanding outward, generating as many possibilities as you can without judging them yet. The key rule in brainstorming: no criticism during generation. Evaluation comes later. Right now, you want quantity over quality, wild ideas, conventional ideas, ideas that seem impossible, ideas that feel ridiculous. Get them all out. Why? Because sometimes the best solutions come from seemingly crazy ideas, and even bad ideas can spark better ones. The human mind is associative. One thought leads to another, and you never know which connection will yield the breakthrough. I use a technique called yes and, borrowed from improv comedy. Whatever idea someone suggests, you respond yes and build on it, no matter how implausible it seems initially. This keeps the creative flow going and prevents the premature shutdown that kills innovative solutions. Another powerful technique, constraint removal. Ask yourself, if I had unlimited money/time/resources, how would I solve this? Then ask, how can I achieve a similar outcome within my actual constraints? This often reveals creative solutions you wouldn't have considered if you'd started with the constraints. When I was solving my company's problem, one impossible idea that emerged was fire everyone and start over with a completely different business model. Obviously not practical, but it led to a doable idea. Restructure roles completely, let go of people who were truly wrong for the work, and rebuild with a clearer hiring process, not as radical as the initial idea, but inspired by it. Step 4. Evaluate solutions, convergent thinking. Now you switch from divergent thinking to convergent thinking, narrowing down from many options to the best choice. This is where your critical thinking skills really shine. For each potential solution, ask, feasibility. Can we actually do this with our resources and constraints? Effectiveness. Will this actually solve the problem or just treat symptoms? Consequences. What are the potential unintended effects? Risks. What could go wrong? Cost versus benefit. Is the benefit worth the cost? Time, money, effort. One powerful evaluation tool is the decision matrix. List your criteria, feasibility, cost, effectiveness, speed of implementation, etc. Assign weights to each based on importance, then score each solution against each criterion. Multiply scores by weights. Add them up, and you have an objective comparison. But don't rely solely on quantitative analysis. Also, use your intuition and experience. Sometimes a solution that scores well on paper feels wrong in your gut, and that feeling might be picking up on something your conscious analysis missed. I've learned to pay attention to what I call the decision test. Imagine you've chosen each solution. How does it feel? Relieving, exciting, dread-inducing. Your emotional response contains information. Just don't let it override rational analysis entirely. Step 5. Implement and monitor. You've chosen a solution. Now execute it. But here's where most people stop thinking critically, assuming the work is done. Actually, implementation is where critical thinking continues to be essential. Break your solution into specific, actionable steps. Assign responsibilities if working with others. Set clear timelines. Identify metrics to monitor progress. And, this is crucial, build in checkpoints to assess whether it's working. Problems are rarely solved in one shot. You implement, you monitor results, you adjust based on what you learn. It's an iterative process. Think of it like steering a ship across the ocean. You're constantly making small corrections based on wind, current, and changing conditions. When I restructured my company, I didn't fire everyone at once or completely overhaul everything overnight. I made changes incrementally, monitoring employee satisfaction and client retention after each change. Some changes worked beautifully. Others needed adjustment. A few needed to be reversed. That's normal and healthy. Build feedback loops into your implementation. How will you know if it's working? What data will you track? Who will you check in with? When will you evaluate? Make this explicit from the start. Step 6. Learn and adapt. Whether your solution works or fails, there's valuable learning to extract. What went well? What didn't? What surprised you? What would you do differently next time? This learning phase completes the cycle and makes you better at solving future problems. Each problem you solve systematically builds your problem-solving muscles. I keep a problem-solving journal where I document significant challenges, my approach, what worked, what didn't, and what I learned. Over time, I've noticed patterns in my thinking, identified my blind spots, and developed intuitions about which approaches work for which types of problems. Now, let me share some advanced problem-solving techniques that can help with especially difficult challenges. Reframing. Sometimes you can't solve a problem because you're framing it wrong. Try looking at it from completely different angles. Instead of, how do I get more clients? Try, how do I make existing clients so delighted they refer others? Instead of, how do I find time to exercise? Try, how do I make exercise so enjoyable I want to make time for it? I learned this from a mentor when I was complaining about never having enough time. He asked, what if the problem isn't lack of time, but lack of clarity about priorities? That reframe changed everything. I didn't need more time. I needed to ruthlessly eliminate low-priority activities. Analogical thinking. How? Have others solved similar problems in different contexts? Industries often solve the same core problems in different ways. What can medicine teach business about diagnosis? What can sports teach education about practice? What can nature teach engineering about efficiency? When I couldn't figure out how to onboard new employees effectively, I studied how video games onboard new players, progressive challenges, immediate feedback, celebration of small wins. I adapted those principles, and our onboarding became significantly more effective. Inverse thinking. Instead of asking, how do I solve this? Ask, how could I make this worse? Then avoid those things and do the opposite. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, swears by this technique. Instead of, how do I have a happy marriage? Ask, how do I ensure a miserable marriage? The answers come easily. Never listen. Always criticize. Keep score. Prioritize work over relationship. Now, do the opposite. Constraint. Leverage. Sometimes constraints aren't obstacles. They're assets. Limited budget forces creativity. Limited time forces prioritization. Limited team size forces clarity of roles. Twitter's 140-character limit, now 280, wasn't a limitation. It was the defining feature that made the platform unique. They leveraged a constraint into an advantage. The stupid question technique. Ask the questions that seem too obvious or basic. These often expose assumptions everyone is making, but nobody is examining. In a meeting about declining website traffic, someone asked the stupid question, do we actually know our users visit our website for? Maybe they want something we're not providing anymore. Turns out, users' needs had evolved, but the website hadn't. That stupid question led to a complete redesign, and traffic recovered. Let me address a common problem-solving trap, solving the wrong level. Some problems can't be solved at the level where they appear. You have to go up or down a level. If you're fighting with your partner about dishes, the problem probably isn't dishes. It's something deeper about respect, appreciation, or division of labor. You have to go up a level. If your company has a morale problem, you can't just solve morale directly. You have to go down a level to specific issues, unclear expectations, poor management, lack of growth opportunities, unfair compensation. Another trap, the curse of knowledge. Once you're deeply familiar with a problem, you can't see it with fresh eyes anymore. You need outsider perspective. This is why companies hire consultants, not because consultants are smarter, but because they see things insiders can't see anymore. When you're stuck on a problem, find someone unfamiliar with the details and explain it to them. Their questions often reveal blind spots. Finally, let's talk about problems that can't be solved, only managed. Some challenges don't have solutions. They have trade-offs. You need to navigate continuously. Balancing. Work and family isn't a problem you solve once. It's an ongoing negotiation. Managing chronic illness isn't about curing it. It's about optimizing quality of life within constraints. Dealing with difficult people at work isn't always about changing them. It's about managing your responses and boundaries. Recognizing unsolvable problems saves you from the frustration of seeking permanent solutions to permanent challenges. Instead, you develop systems and practices for managing them effectively. As we close this chapter, I want you to understand that problem solving is a skill that compounds over time. Each problem you solve systematically makes you better at solving the next one. Patterns emerge, intuitions develop. You build a mental library of approaches that work. Start small. Don't wait for a major crisis to practice these techniques. Use them on everyday problems. How to organize your closet. How to improve your morning routine. How to have difficult conversations. The framework works at any scale. In the next chapter, we're going to focus on a specific type of problem solving that's crucial in today's information-saturated world. Analyzing information and arguments. You'll learn to dissect claims, evaluate evidence, and spot flawed reasoning with precision. But first, your assignment. Choose a problem you're currently facing, big or small. Work through the 6-step framework we discussed. Document your process. Notice where you get stuck, what feels natural, what requires effort. This hands-on practice is how systematic problem-solving becomes second nature. The path through the maze is becoming clearer. Keep walking. Chapter 6, The Truth Detective, Analyzing Information and Arguments in a World of Noise. Imagine you're standing in Times Square, New York, at midnight on New Year's Eve. Screens flash from every direction, sounds assault you from all sides. Millions of messages compete for your attention. Now, multiply that chaos by 1,000, and you have a rough approximation of the modern information environment. Every day you're bombarded with claims, arguments, news, opinions, advertisements, propaganda, and persuasion attempts. Some are truthful, some are misleading, some are outright false, and most are somewhere in between. Partial truths, biased perspectives, or well-intentioned but flawed reasoning. How do you navigate this? How do you separate signal from noise, truth from spin, solid reasoning from clever manipulation? You become a truth detective. You learn to analyze information and arguments with the precision of a forensic investigator examining a crime scene. This chapter is your training manual. Let's start with the fundamental structure of arguments. Every argument, no matter how complex, can be broken down into basic components: claims, premises, and conclusions. A claim is an assertion that something is true or should be done. Exercise improves mental health. We should invest in renewable energy. this product will change your life. Premises are the reasons, evidence, or assumptions offered to support the claim. Studies show exercise reduces anxiety. Climate change is accelerating. Customers report dramatic results. The conclusion is what the argument is trying to convince you to accept or do. Therefore, you should exercise regularly. Therefore, we need policy changes. Therefore, you should buy this product. Simple example. All dogs love treats. Max is a dog. Therefore, Max loves treats. The first two statements are premises. The last is the conclusion. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You need to evaluate both the structure of the argument, is the reasoning valid, and the truth of the premises. Are the claims actually accurate? An argument can have valid logic but be based on false premises. All birds can swim. Penguins are birds. Therefore, penguins can swim. The logic is valid. If the premises were true, the conclusion would have to be true. But the first premise is false, so the conclusion, while following logically, isn't sound. Conversely, you can have true premises but invalid logic. Most doctors recommend exercise. Sarah is a doctor. Therefore, Sarah recommends exercise. The premises might be true, but the conclusion doesn't necessarily follow. Sarah might be in the minority of doctors who don't recommend exercise, or she might recommend it for some patients, but not others. Sound reasoning requires both valid logic and true premises. Now let's talk about types of arguments you'll encounter and how to evaluate them. Deductive arguments move from general principles to specific conclusions. If the premises are true and the logic is valid, the conclusion is guaranteed. All mammals are warm-blooded. Whales are mammals. Therefore, whales are warm-blooded. Airtight. Assuming the premises are correct, inductive arguments move from specific observations to general conclusions. I've seen 100 crows, and they were all black. Therefore, all crows are probably black. This gives you probability, not certainty. And as we discussed earlier, one white crow would disprove it. Inductive reasoning is how science works. We observe patterns and form theories. But good inductive arguments require large, representative samples. If you've only seen crows in one region, your conclusion about all crows is weak. Abductive arguments infer the best explanation for observations. The grass is wet, the sky is cloudy, it probably rained. This is reasoning to the best explanation, not certain, but likely given the evidence. Most real-world arguments are abductive or inductive, not deductive. They deal in probabilities and best explanations, not certainties. Understanding this helps you calibrate your confidence appropriately. Now let's examine evidence evaluation, the crucial skill of determining whether the premises of an argument are actually true. Not all evidence is created equal. Consider these questions. Is the evidence relevant? Someone might cite statistics about crime rates in general when arguing about a specific policy. Are those statistics actually relevant to the policy being discussed, or are they a distraction? Is the source credible? A peer-reviewed study published in a respected scientific journal carries more weight than a blog post by someone with no expertise. But even credible sources can be wrong, especially on new or complex topics where knowledge is still developing. Is there sufficient evidence? One study, one example, one testimonial. These aren't enough to establish a strong conclusion. You need multiple sources, ideally from different perspectives, before accepting a claim as well supported. Is the evidence recent and relevant to current conditions? A study from 1975 about computer usage might not apply to today's technology landscape. What's the quality of the methodology? Was this a rigorous study with controls or a casual survey? Was the sample size adequate and representative? Were confounding variables controlled for? Let me share a real example. A few years ago, I saw an article claiming that coffee causes cancer, citing a study. Alarming, right? I dug deeper. The study showed that extremely high temperatures, above 149 degrees Fahrenheit, might increase cancer risk, regardless of the beverage. It wasn't about coffee specifically. It was about drinking very hot liquids. The headline was misleading, cherry-picking one aspect and framing it sensationally. This is evidence cherry-picking, selecting only the evidence that supports your conclusion while ignoring contradictory evidence. It's incredibly common in everything from product marketing to political debates. The antidote is seeking out comprehensive evidence. Don't just read one article on a topic, read several, including ones that disagree. Don't just look at studies supporting a claim. Look for studies that contradict it and see how they're explained or refuted. Now let's discuss identifying flawed reasoning. Even when evidence is solid, the reasoning connecting evidence to conclusions can be faulty. These flaws are called logical fallacies, and recognizing them is essential for critical thinking. We touched on some in earlier chapters, but let's go deeper. Appeal to authority. Dr. Thompson says this diet works, and he's a famous doctor, so it must be true. But what's Dr. Thompson's expertise? Is he a nutrition specialist or a podiatrist? Does he have financial interest in promoting this diet? Authority matters, but it's not absolute proof. Appeal to emotion. Using emotional manipulation instead of logical reasoning. Think of the children. Might be emotionally compelling, but it doesn't constitute an argument about whether a policy is effective. Emotional appeals aren't always wrong. Sometimes they highlight real moral concerns, but they're not logical evidence. Straw man. Misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack. My opponent wants to reduce military spending, which means he wants to leave our country defenseless. That's probably not what the opponent actually argued. Always check whether critics are addressing the actual argument or a distorted version. False cause. Assuming that because two things correlate, one causes the other. Ice cream sales and drowning deaths both increase in summer. Therefore, ice cream causes drowning. Absurd, right? But this fallacy appears constantly in subtler forms. Both are caused by a third factor, warm weather, not each other. Bandwagon. Everyone believes this, so it must be true. Popularity doesn't equal truth. History is full of widely believed ideas that turned out to be completely wrong. Tu quoque, you too. You can't criticize my smoking when you used to smoke. But whether the critic smoked is irrelevant to whether the criticism is valid. The argument should stand or fall on its own merits. Slippery slope. We discussed this earlier. Assuming one action will lead to extreme consequences without evidence for that chain. If we allow same-sex marriage, next people will marry animals. There's no logical connection between these things. Red herring. Introducing an irrelevant topic to distract from the actual issue. In a debate about economic policy, someone suddenly starts talking about their opponent's personal life. That's a red herring, distracting from the real topic. Begging the question, circular reasoning. The conclusion is hidden in the premises. The Bible is true because it's the Word of God, and we know it's the Word of God because the Bible says so. You're assuming what you're trying to prove. Here's a practice I recommend: fallacy spotting. Spend a week identifying one logical fallacy per day in media you consume: news articles, social media posts, advertisements, political speeches. Write down the fallacy, explain why it's flawed, and note what a more sound argument would look like. This trains your mind to automatically recognize weak reasoning. Eventually, it becomes second nature, like a musician recognizing off-key notes. Now, let's talk about analyzing complex arguments, the kind you encounter in serious articles, books, policy debates, and professional contexts. These aren't simple syllogisms. They're multi-layered arguments with sub-arguments, qualifications, and nuanced claims. Here's a systematic approach. First, identify the main conclusion. What is the author ultimately trying to convince you of? Sometimes this is stated explicitly at the beginning or end. Sometimes it's buried in the middle. Sometimes you have to infer it. Second, map out the argument structure. What are the main supporting points? How do they connect to the conclusion? Are there sub-arguments supporting those points? Visual mapping helps. Draw boxes and arrows showing how claims connect. Third, examine each premise. Is it true? What evidence supports it? Is the evidence strong? Are there unstated assumptions? Fourth, evaluate the logic. Do the premises actually support the conclusion? Or are there logical gaps? Are there alternative explanations the argument hasn't considered? Fifth, consider counterarguments. What would the strongest critic say? How does the argument address potential objections? Let me walk you through an example. Suppose you're reading an article arguing, "We should implement universal basic income because automation will eliminate most jobs and people will need income security." Main conclusion: implement universal basic income, UBI. Main premise: automation will eliminate most jobs. Supporting premise: people will need income security. Now analyze, is the first premise true? Will automation actually eliminate most jobs, or will it create new types of jobs, as technology has historically done? What evidence does the author provide? Are there studies on both sides of this question? Is the second premise true? Yes, people do need income security, but does that specifically require UBI? Or could other solutions, job retraining programs, education investment, etc., provide that security? Even if both premises are true, does the conclusion necessarily follow? Maybe automation will change jobs, but not eliminate them. Maybe UBI has unintended consequences that outweigh its benefits. A strong argument would acknowledge these complexities and address counterarguments. A weak argument would ignore them and present a simplistic narrative. Here's a crucial skill: steel manning. This is the opposite of straw manning. Instead of attacking the weakest version of an argument, you construct the strongest possible version, even stronger than the original author presented. Why would you do this? Because engaging with the strongest version of an idea makes you sharper. If you can refute a Steelman argument, you've actually accomplished something. If you can only refute weak arguments, you're just practicing confirmation bias. Try this exercise. Take an idea you strongly disagree with. Now write the best possible argument for it, incorporating the strongest evidence and reasoning you can find. Then, and only then, write your critique. You'll find your critique is more sophisticated and compelling when you first genuinely understood the opposing view. Let's discuss hidden assumptions, the unstated premises that arguments depend on but don't explicitly acknowledge. These are often where arguments are weakest. Example argument: we should hire only candidates with college degrees for this position. Hidden assumptions: college degrees indicate competence for this role. Non-degree holders lack necessary skills. The benefits of degree requirements outweigh the costs, limiting candidate pool, potentially excluding talented people. By making hidden assumptions explicit, you can examine whether they're actually true. Another example: this supplement is natural, so it's safe. Hidden assumption: natural equals safe. But poison ivy is natural. Arsenic is natural. Natural doesn't automatically mean safe, effective, or beneficial. Watch for loaded language, words chosen to evoke emotional responses rather than convey neutral information. Freedom fighters versus terrorists. Tax relief versus revenue reduction. Pro-life versus anti-choice. Pro-choice versus pro-abortion. The words themselves carry arguments and assumptions. Critical thinkers recognize this and ask, what would this claim sound like in neutral language? Finally, let's talk about evaluating sources in the digital age. Anyone can publish anything online. Disinformation spreads as easily as accurate information, sometimes more easily because false information is often more sensational and emotionally engaging. Questions to ask about sources: who is the author? What are their credentials? Do they have relevant expertise? What are their potential biases or conflicts of interest? What is the publication? Is it a reputable outlet with editorial standards or a blog with no fact-checking? Is it known for a particular bias? What is the date? Is this current information or outdated? What are the sources cited? Does the article reference primary sources, or is it just opinion? Can you trace claims back to original research? What's the methodology? For studies or data-based claims, how was the information gathered? Was it rigorous? Who funds this? Is there a financial incentive influencing the conclusions? Do other credible sources agree? Is this claim corroborated by multiple independent sources? Or is it an outlier? I've developed a personal rule, the controversial claim standard. For any claim that contradicts established expert consensus or seems too good/bad to be true, I require multiple high-quality sources before accepting it. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. As we close this chapter, I want to emphasize something vital. The goal isn't to become cynical or to distrust everything. The goal is to become appropriately skeptical, questioning claims while remaining open to truth, wherever it comes from. Some people swing too far into cynicism, dismissing all arguments, trusting no sources, seeing conspiracies everywhere. That's not critical thinking. That's another form of bias. Others remain too credulous, accepting claims at face value, trusting authority blindly, never questioning their information diet. That's equally problematic. The balance is evidence-proportioned belief, calibrating your confidence to the quality and quantity of evidence available. Strong evidence deserves high confidence. Weak evidence deserves tentative acceptance at best, and you should always remain open to changing your mind when better evidence emerges. In our next section, we'll explore how to engage with diverse perspectives, not just to analyze them, but to genuinely learn from them and integrate multiple viewpoints into more sophisticated understanding. But first, your practice assignment. Find an argument you instinctively agree with and one you instinctively disagree with. Analyze both using the tools from this chapter. Identify the structure, evaluate the evidence, spot any fallacies, examine hidden assumptions. Be as rigorous with the argument you agree with as the one you disagree with. This is how you transcend bias, by holding all arguments to the same standard, regardless of whether they confirm your existing beliefs. The truth is out there. Now you have the tools to find it. Chapter 7. The Kaleidoscope Mind. Embracing Diverse Perspectives. 5 years ago, I thought I had the world figured out. Then I spent 3 months in Southeast Asia, living with families whose worldviews shattered every certainty I held. A Buddhist monk in Thailand who owned nothing but seemed infinitely content. A Vietnamese mother working 3 jobs who still helped her neighbors. A Cambodian farmer who couldn't read but possessed profound wisdom. These experiences taught me something crucial. I'd been seeing the world through a single lens, thinking it was the complete picture. That's what this chapter is about, developing a kaleidoscope mind that can rotate perspectives and synthesize diverse viewpoints into richer understanding. Here's why this matters. We live in echo chambers. Social media algorithms show us content we already agree with. News outlets cater to specific audiences. We self-select into groups that think like us. The result? We become increasingly certain while understanding opposing views less and less. This is intellectually catastrophic. Complex problems require diverse perspectives. Innovation happens at the intersection of different viewpoints. Personal growth demands exposure to challenging ideas. Practice active perspective seeking. If you lean progressive, read thoughtful conservative writers, not to hate read, but to genuinely understand. If you're religious, engage with atheist philosophy. If you're urban, understand rural viewpoints. I practice viewpoint diversification. Each month, I deliberately expose myself to 3 sources I expect to disagree with. Sometimes I still disagree after, but my disagreement becomes more sophisticated. I understand the strongest versions of opposing arguments. And occasionally, I actually change my mind. Practice perspective-taking journaling. Choose someone whose views frustrate you. Write a journal entry from their perspective, in first person, explaining their position as convincingly as possible. Try to articulate not just what they believe, but why, the experiences, values, and fears that lead them there. This doesn't require agreement. It requires understanding. And understanding transforms conflict from us versus them into different humans with different assumptions trying to solve problems. Engage in dialogue, not debate. Debate is about winning. Dialogue is about learning. In debate, you prove you're right. In dialogue, you discover what's true. Practical techniques. The pause practice. When someone says something you disagree with, pause 3 seconds before responding. Reflective listening. Paraphrase their point back before responding, "Help me understand." Instead of, "That's wrong," say, "Help me understand why you think that." Acknowledge. Validity. Even when disagreeing overall, acknowledge valid points. Build diverse networks. Don't just read diverse perspectives academically. Have actual relationships with people different from you. Real relationships. Create empathy that transforms understanding. I deliberately cultivate friendships across demographic, ideological, and experiential lines. These aren't token relationships. They're genuine friendships. And because of that foundation of care, we can have difficult conversations impossible with strangers. Important caveat: engaging with diverse perspectives doesn't mean platforming harmful views. There's a difference between diverse perspectives and dangerous propaganda. Holocaust denial isn't a perspective worth engaging. White supremacy isn't a viewpoint to understand empathetically. Use judgment about which perspectives deserve engagement. Practice the "what if they're right" exercise. Pick a position you strongly oppose. For 10 minutes, genuinely entertain the possibility it's correct and you're wrong. What would that mean? What evidence might you be ignoring? This is extraordinarily uncomfortable. Do it anyway. It will sophisticate your thinking dramatically. Remember, diverse. Perspectives aren't just nice to have, they're essential for truth-seeking and problem-solving. Homogeneous groups produce groupthink. Diverse groups catch blind spots and create more robust solutions. But here's the paradox. To benefit from diverse perspectives, you need critical thinking. Without it, you'll just be swayed by whoever spoke last. With it, you can evaluate perspectives, extract insights, and synthesize something better than any single viewpoint. Chapter 8. The Choice Architect, Mastering the Art of Decision-Making. It's 2 a.m. You're lying awake, mind racing. Should you take that job? Stay in the relationship? Invest or play safe? Here's the truth. The goal isn't perfect decisions. It's good enough decisions with available information, made at the right time, adapted when new information emerges. 10 years ago, I left a high-paying job to start a business. Everyone thought I was crazy. For 2 years, it looked like they were right. But here's what I learned. That decision wasn't a moment. It was a commitment to a direction followed by hundreds of adaptations. Decision-making isn't a moment. It's a process. Step 1. Frame the decision correctly. Should I quit my job is poorly framed. Too binary. Better. What career path aligns with my values, uses my strengths, and supports the lifestyle I want? And what steps would that require? Ask, what are 5 different ways to frame this decision? What assumptions am I making? What alternatives haven't I considered? Step 2. Clarify values and criteria. Every decision involves trade-offs. You need clarity about what matters most. I keep a personal values hierarchy, autonomy and creative freedom, deep relationships, meaningful work, financial security, enough, not maximum, health and energy. For specific decisions, translate values into concrete criteria and weight them. Not everything matters equally. Step 3. Generate options. Force yourself to generate at least 5 alternatives before evaluating. The best choice is often one you haven't thought of yet. Use what else. Brainstorming. Write obvious options. Ask what else 3 times. The 7th option is often surprisingly good, and you'd never find it if you stopped at 3. Step 4. Gather information. Avoid analysis paralysis. Use the reversibility test. Highly reversible decisions. Don't overthink moderately reversible. Do solid research. Highly irreversible. Invest serious time. Set an information-gathering deadline. Without it, research becomes procrastination. Step 5. Manage uncertainty through scenario planning. Instead of predicting the future, impossible, imagine several plausible scenarios. For each, ask, what would I need to do? How would I handle it? This mental preparation reduces anxiety and improves adaptability. Step 6. Use both logic and intuition. Logic without intuition misses subconscious pattern recognition. Intuition without logic is vulnerable to bias. The synthesis is informed intuition. Analyze thoroughly, then check your gut. If there's tension, investigate it. Step 7. De-risk when possible. Instead of one big irreversible decision, test the waters. Considering a career change, take a side project first, thinking about relocating, rent for 3 months, before selling your house. Incremental commitment gives you information before making large, irreversible choices. Step 8. Make the decision and commit. At some point, you need to choose. The cost of delayed decision often exceeds the cost of an imperfect choice. Use the regret minimization framework. Imagine yourself at 80, looking back. Which choice would you regret less? Once you decide, commit fully. Half-hearted decisions get half-hearted effort. Step 9. Implement and monitor break decisions into specific action steps. Set checkpoints to evaluate, is this working? What needs adjustment? Step 10. Practice flexibility. New information will emerge. Conditions will change. Adapt. Flexibility isn't weakness. It's intelligence. But balance it with giving strategies time to work. Common traps. Decision fatigue. Make important decisions when fresh groupthink. Assign devil's advocates. Encourage disagreement. Sunk cost fallacy. Ask, if deciding fresh today, what would I choose? Overconfidence. Conduct pre-mortems, build buffers. Good decision-making is a skill you build, not a trait you're born with. Every decision is practice. Keep a decision journal. Record choices, reasoning, and outcomes. Learn your patterns, biases, and blind spots. Chapter 9. Building Mental Resilience, the Unbreakable Mind. Mental resilience is like bamboo in a storm, bending without breaking. It's adaptability in facing adversity. Build it through emotional intelligence and mindfulness. Practice observing thoughts without judgment. Develop a growth mindset. See challenges as opportunities, failures as learning. Reframe setbacks. My failed workshop wasn't failure, but data for improvement. Build support networks. Practice active coping. Take direct action on problems. Resilience strengthens with use. Each challenge overcome builds capacity for the next. Keep a resilience journal. Celebrate small wins. Maintain physical health. Practice gratitude. Develop purpose. Remember, resilience isn't never falling. It's getting back up stronger. Chapter 10. Effective communication and critical thinking. Building bridges communication creates shared understanding through clear expression and active listening. Practice active listening. Fully. Concentrate. Note body language. Provide feedback. Critical thinking helps analyze arguments and identify assumptions. When speaking, organize thoughts logically. Tailor messages to your audience. Engage in dialogue, not debate. Ask probing questions. Manage conflicts by finding common ground. Nonverbal communication matters. Body language often conveys more than words. Use the 3 C's: clear, concise, complete. Practice validation. Acknowledge valid points before disagreeing. Approach disagreements with curiosity. What led you to that conclusion? Effective communication plus critical thinking enables you to express ideas clearly and collaborate effectively. Chapter 11. Critical thinking in everyday life, from theory to practice. Apply critical thinking to daily scenarios for transformative results. In relationships, when conflicts arise, identify underlying issues. My friend's arguments about chores were really about feeling unappreciated. At work, use root cause analysis. Rachel's deadline problem stemmed from unclear priorities, not insufficient effort. As consumers, question sources, examine evidence, research thoroughly before purchases. In decisions, use the impact versus urgency matrix to prioritize daily tasks. For ethics, consider values, consequences, and affected parties. Start small. Analyze one thing daily. Apply critical thinking to one conversation, one decision, one article. The goal isn't overthinking everything, but developing thoughtful habits. Chapter 12, Ethical Considerations in Critical Thinking. Thinking with integrity. Critical thinking without ethics is manipulation. Ethics without critical thinking is blind dogma. Together, they create wisdom, develop moral sensitivity, see ethical dimensions in situations, use frameworks, utilitarianism, best outcomes, deontology, moral duties, virtue ethics, good character, care ethics, relationships. Real ethics involves competing values. Critical thinking helps weigh factors and justify decisions, align actions with beliefs, examine motivations, ensure consistency. Everyday ethics matter. How do you treat others? Give credit. Speak up against unfairness. Use tests. Would you publicize this decision? What would your role model do? Will you be proud in 10 years? Think clearly. Act with integrity. Live wisely. Part 5. The Journey Continues. Chapters 13 to 14. Final 200 words. Chapter 13. Lifelong Learning and Continuous Improvement. Critical thinking mastery isn't a destination. It's a lifelong journey of growth and discovery. Cultivate intellectual curiosity. Explore topics outside your comfort zone. If you're a scientist, read philosophy. If you're an artist, explore economics. Cross-pollination sparks innovation. Develop a personal learning practice. Set aside time daily for reading, reflection, or skill building. Experiment with podcasts, online courses, hands-on projects. Practice deliberate practice. Push beyond current abilities. Receive feedback. Refine skills. For critical thinking, tackle increasingly complex problems. Seek challenging debates. Ask others to critique your reasoning. Create a critical thinking practice. Regularly analyze articles. Dissect arguments. Journal about complex issues. Consistency transforms skills into habits. Embrace failure as learning. When reasoning is flawed, analyze what went wrong. Each mistake becomes a lesson. Build networks of fellow learners. Engage in discussions. Join book clubs. Find mentors who challenge your thinking. Keep a decision journal. Record choices, reasoning, and outcomes. Patterns emerge revealing biases and growth areas. Remember, the goal isn't perfection, but continuous improvement. Each day, think a bit more clearly than yesterday. Chapter 14. Conclusion and Future Pathways. Your Journey Forward. We've traveled far together through the landscape of critical thinking. Let's recap the essential tools you've gained. You've learned to understand and challenge your thought patterns and biases. Analyze information and arguments with precision. Solve problems using structured, creative approaches. Make confident decisions despite uncertainty. Build mental resilience to adapt to challenges. Communicate effectively and engage in constructive dialogue. Apply ethical reasoning to complex dilemmas. Embrace lifelong learning and continuous improvement. But remember, critical thinking isn't just techniques, it's a mindset. It's approaching the world with curiosity, rigor, and open-mindedness. As you move forward, integrate these skills into daily life. Question your assumptions. Challenge yourself with new perspectives. Approach problems systematically. Make thoughtful decisions. Build resilience through each challenge. The future demands critical thinkers. In our age of AI, automation, and rapid change, the ability to think clearly, solve complex problems, and adapt will be your greatest asset. Your capacity for nuanced ethical reasoning will guide humanity through technological and social challenges. But beyond professional success, critical thinking offers personal fulfillment. You'll make better decisions, navigate conflicts gracefully, build stronger relationships, and develop deeper self-understanding. Your skills aren't just for personal success, they're a force for positive change. By thinking critically, communicating effectively, and reasoning ethically, you influence others and contribute to solving pressing challenges. Remember, every decision is practice. Small daily choices train you for big life-changing ones. Keep a decision journal, notice patterns, learn continuously. The journey never truly ends. There will always be new challenges, new ideas, new skills to develop. Embrace this ongoing process. Let curiosity guide you and critical thinking be your compass. You're now equipped with humanity's most powerful tool, the ability to think critically. Use it wisely, use it often, use it to make a difference. The future is unwritten. With your critical thinking skills, you have the power to shape it. Thank you for this journey. Now go forth, think critically, act wisely, and never stop learning. The world needs thinkers like you to lead the way into a brighter, more reasoned future.